Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, and welcome to another episode of All Things Iliast, wherever you're watching from. Not sure what time it is over there, but hope you're well, hope you're happy and fulfilled, and we can entertain you with another entertaining episode of All Things Iliast. I've got my shades on because I'm recording it in the afternoon. The sun's out, but it's also super windy where I am at the moment. So you might hear some wind howling, like or hitting up against the exterior of the house. So my apologies for that, but I shall try to keep the audio as neat as possible. With the Premier League starting and the Paris Olympics and everything sports that's been happening around, I will focus this episode a lot more on the sports heritage, and we'll talk about some interesting events at the Olympics, and I'll share a story or two, and we'll keep it entertaining. Just to get into it, there's the sports itself as an event has existed in human history for thousands and thousands of years. Human beings have, for most of their history and existence, have engaged in games, in showmanship, and have used that as an element to entertain the masses. Each era, each time, ancient Egyptians, Romans, moving across in the world across different dynasties have got their own forms of sporting events, their own legends who've lived beyond their lives and have lived through the history because of their engagement and their superhuman capabilities that they were able to display via sports, which is fascinating because human beings have always been able to sort of break those boundaries and achieve the impossible in terms of what a human body can actually accomplish. You see a guy at the Olympics who jumps with the pole and how high they can go, and they can fall and be up and then do it again and then again. It's quite impressive. It is quite impressive. When you talk about the legends of the recent times, you've got your Michael Jordans, Usain Bolt, Roger Federer, Muhammad Ali, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, George St. Pierre, Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, existing on like ongoing, Michael Phelps, Wayne Gretzky, and John Jones. You got these few names who are like at the moment. Conor McGregor as well, I would say, and Khabib Nurmagomedov, which are household names from the recent times, and with their remarkable achievements and their stories, which will live well beyond our time as well. So, like from 100 years now on, people will still talk about these amazing superhuman athletes. Referring to the Paris Olympics, you do see that there's an array of athletes from all around the world who are there to represent their countries and are striving to fulfill their Olympic dreams. It's a very competitive sport with very high stakes and minimum margins of error, which is again is a testament to the human spirit. And then you see them as they compete against each other, and then whoever's in the top three on the podiums, how they engage, they interact, and the camaraderie which is on display um, is very sort of heartwarming to watch, as opposed to in and direct contrast to the stereotypes that the media enforces upon us about people from certain nations or certain countries. These Olympics obviously have been scandalous with their own sort of list of sort of issues. There's that Indian wrestler who gave her access pass to her sister and got banned. There's another one who missed weight by 100 grams. Um, there was Gunn, obviously proudly representing Australia in breaking. We'll come to that. That's one of my talking points. And there's this first gold medal in athletics by the Pakistani named Arshad Nadeem. Before we get into that, I can't help but broach this subject, a lot of the times we hear about sporting heritage and sports history and how it's a core element of the sport itself. It's got like sport heritage has got a strong connection to its roots, where it's from, how it has has evolved throughout the history, and how important it is to sort of recognize that and appreciate that. And I would go to the FIFA World Cup in Qatar in 2022, which was a perfect example of the disdain expressed within the confines of Europe about handing over the hosting rights to an oil rich country which had no history or sport heritage in football, which is a valid point. Noting that there was human rights abuses and labor abuse when the construction of the facilities was being completed for this event, and Qatar being an oil-rich country in the Middle East, a lot of the chatter among the beacons of Europe about human rights violations, and especially the importance of sports heritage was on display. And people were rightfully upset that money itself had prevailed, and the only reason Qatar was handed the hosting rights because they could afford to do it. However, the upcoming FIFA World Cup of 2026 is now being hosted by the United States, which is one of the hosting countries for this event. I think the other two, and I could be incorrect, are Canada and Mexico. Now, we talk about the United States. It's also a country with not a lot of football history until recently. A country embroiled in controversies, a country funding wars and arming its allies to commit harrowing war crimes, a country that has only recently celebrated a war criminal and applauded a war criminal within their Congress, a country which is notorious for its police using excessive force, and a country with turf grounds which has recently claimed a lot of ACLs and MCLs of the Premier League players who have played their club friendlies or the preseason friendlies um, within the in the United States. That's all well and good. What I want to talk about and know is that where is the outrage now? Are the beacons of humanity, are the beacons of freedom in Europe, who were very insistent on the importance of human rights as well as sports heritage, happy with this outcome? Are they happy for the United States to succeed in the capitalistic opportunity to host a FIFA event? Why is the outrage so intense when it comes down to a country in the Middle East as opposed to a country like the United States? Happy to engage in a conversation and understand why it's not as outrageous. But I'm just pointing out the overly obvious hypocrisy when it comes down to this. We are very upset. We were very upset about the no serving of alcohol in Qatar, but now I'm sure the fans will be overly happy to be able to get inebriated in the US and be able to deal with the US police. And this is not an attack on the US, so please don't come for me, the CIA. But I just want to point out the drastic contrast in reactions, which is a bit hypocritical. Back to the Olympics, Australia, I think, has gotten 18 gold medals. It's always has sort of impressed me and inspired me now, being in Australia, how sports is taken very, very seriously in this country. How sports is always a focus within the schooling as well since a young age, and you see the outcome. Australia has 25 million people, and I think Australia has ended up with 18 gold medals, 19 silver and 16 bronze, with 53 in total. And in the tally of the medals, Australia is number fourth, with the first being the US. Number two is China. Number three is Japan, which is equally impressive. Number four is Australia. Number five is France. Number six is Great Britain. I can't see them on the list here, but I am pretty confident that I am correct. As awesome as that is, I am sure a lot of you have heard the name Rachel Gunn, who proudly represented Australia in breaking, which is the break dancing sport, included in the Olympics for the first time uh, in 2024 in the Olympic history. And she was proudly representing Australia on a world stage. And what happened afterwards is everything that um, became sort of like a laughing stock and still is ongoing in terms of its controversy, outrage, or just a general media presence. Reagan, a 36-year-old woman, a lecturer at Macquarie University, would go on to represent Australia in breaking. However, during her first performance, she would go outside of the scope of breaking. I don't even know a lot about just like dancing itself, but she went the creative route, and that ended up with some quite horrendous moves, which I am sure will result in a lot of memes to come in the future, and which I genuinely felt bad. Because in my head, I'm thinking this woman is 36 years old. Like at that age, I think I am closer to her age. If anything, well, I'm not her age, but I'm closer to her age. So being old enough to know better, and you represent your country at the Olympics, and your performance is not just a dud, it's just downright just horrible, and it's also cringeworthy. So you go through that, and that's, I think, having the pressure is itself, like, I would say it's embarrassing. But she went through that. I heard some of the clips of her interviews before the performance. And within sports, sometimes you do well, sometimes you do poorly, and then you move on. So I felt bad about her. I felt bad enough that I made a TikTok saying that I think we owe her an apology and we need to sort of cut her some slack. She obviously was there to represent her country. However, I did highlight the fact that sometimes people are too nice and we don't really express um, our opinion about someone. And where I'm going with this is that her coaching team, whoever approved her performance, even down to her family and friends, you got to have people in your life who can be honest with you, who can keep you in check. I do a podcast. I don't have a lot of viewers, but I've got friends who are kind enough to watch it. Hamad, that's for you. Um, who are kind enough to watch it and give me feedback. It could be good, it could be bad. There's some things I do well, there's other things I don't do well. And I wouldn't be aware of that. Well, I would be because I also self reflect, but I wouldn't be more conscious of it if I wouldn't have a friend group or people like around me who would be open and honest with me. So what I initially felt was that she basically was encouraged and applauded like we do right now in a weird way within the society itself. And I think encouraging people is good, but at some point, if it's a competitive sport, you gotta have people around you who can tell you, hey, what you're doing is bad and you're not good at this. So I felt bad. I felt she was let down by her team, by the people in her life. But the more you look into the story, you realize that it was probably a setup from the get go. She planned to do this, to use it as an experiment. And then I also found out what enraged me, because I'm thinking in my head she's a PhD in maybe STEM or something, or in something sort of a bit more useful. But then I found out that she has a PhD in breakdancing or in ballroom dancing or like whatever. So she has a PhD in dancing. She has got some experience in ballroom dancing, and people knew that she wasn't that good. And somehow she was allowed to go to the Olympics and represent her country. And that's hilarious. It's like when you hear about it sometimes when someone from, I think recently, a female athlete from Somalia, because her uncle was higher up in the government, she got the opportunity to join the Olympics team, and you could tell she was just like a normal person. And when the race started, she was like way far behind. It was not even competitive. So something of a similar situation in this case as well. Sad, but hilarious at the same time. Now I think if you look into the intent there as well, I think she does that really well in like in which she's gotten the attention or the platform that maybe she was looking for. And I think right now, within the social media and how and your Instagrams and your Facebook and TikToks, that exposure, good or bad, is in a way a good thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if she was back. I mean, but then again, in Australia though, there's something called a tall poppy syndrome, in which people sort of keep everyone else in check. If you become larger than life, if you think you have outgrown um, your job, it could potentially be just like a normal job, or it could be a sport, or you're a media person or a politician. Australia has a very nice way to sort of cut that shit down and bring you back to the ground from your high horse. Happened to a lot of people. Happened to Adam Goods, who was a player in the AFL. I think it started with his celebration. That was something of a roar that he would do, and he would get some slack from the media. And then he was subjected to a racist remark while he was playing, and he pointed out a 13-year-old girl, and he singled her out as the one who was involved in the incident. And since then, he was booed every time he would be in the stadium. And I think he's also refused to accept the AFL Hall of Fame because of this, because he became a pariah of the sport. He was subjected to constant like embarrassment and boos, which is quite heartbreaking. Another example, not of the tall poppy syndrome, but I think maybe it could fall in that category itself, is Sally Robbins. And I'm gonna have to read through some of the stuff because I don't know a lot of these details about her, but I've heard her story only recently, I think less than a year ago, and it's always been on my mind, which in itself I think is impressive. So, born on 15th July 1981, Sally Robbins from Perth would attend the rowing program at the Western Australian Institute of Sport, and would later represent Australia at the women's 4 at the 2000 Olympics and the women's 8 at the 2004 Olympics. So, an established rower who was good at what she did and a very good athlete. However, the infamous incident would happen in the 2004 Olympics final, held on the 22nd of August. Her team was third through the first 1,000 meters, but had dropped to fifth position with 500 meters remaining. And they were 3 seconds behind the Romanian crew, who were in the first position. During the final 400 meters, Robbins, who was physically exhausted, dropped her oar and, allowing it to drag in the water, gave up and lay back on teammate Julia Wilson's lap. Australia consequently would finish last, 10 seconds behind the fifth place crew. Robbins was accused of mental weakness and publicly ridiculed in the Australian media as Lay Down Sally, which was based off a song by Eric Clapton named Lay Down Sally. This was not the first time Robbins had been involved in such an incident. In women's Quad skull at the 2002 World Rowing Championships. Robbins had also dropped her oar, costing Australia a certain victory. 2000 Summer Olympics silver medalist Rachel Taylor was quoted as saying Australia was blitzing in the race, leading the entire field all the way. It was as about as sure a thing as you could get to having the world title in the bag. When, with approximately 400 meters to go, Sally Robbins stopped rowing. The Australian crew dropped back and finished in fourth position. Sally's three teammates were understandably shocked, devastated, and inconsolable, not at all dissimilar to the sickening reenactment I witnessed on Sunday. And she accosted her team a world title and then also an Olympic medal. Hearing about Sally's story makes me a bit sad. What's funny is that at the very end it says, without any apparent sense of irony, on Rowing Australia athlete's profile page, Robin's personal motto is recorded as never surrender the dream unless you're tired and exhausted and you're 400 meters from the finish. You might want to take a break because sometimes you deserve it. How about the other people can now take charge and make sure that they can see you to the end? Those watching may also be wondering about my mustache and the amount of facial hair on my face. I do look like a peeled potato, but I have decided to keep whatever this is on my upper lip because I like to look like a creep. That's something I really enjoy. And on the flip side, if I had shaved this as well, I think it's sort of hard to look at myself in the mirror because this only happened recently. This is why I think social media is bad for you, because I saw a reel or a TikTok of a guy using like a blade to shave his beard. And in my head, I'm thinking that's a real man. Like, look at him go. But like, it's just, it's amazing. He's going back to the basics. Because I've been using the electric trimmer for the past however long, like 10 years. I don't have a lot of facial hair. Well, I have a neck beard more than I have facial hair. So, and I looked at it and I'm thinking to myself that I think I'm gonna do that. I think I might just shave and see how we go because I haven't shaved in over like 11 years. So, just like that, I went to Kohl's and I bought the supplies. I bought a razor, shaving gel, and an aftershave, and I went at it. This was, I think, last week or the week before. And then when I was done, I looked like a shaved armadillo or something like that. I just couldn't look myself in the mirror. But I had trimmed my mustache too short. So this time around, I'm trying to redo it and see if this can stick. If not, I might just resort back to keeping a light stubble and not looking like this. Anyways, let's talk about a very important, a very happy news coming from Pakistan itself in the Olympics, winning their first medal at the Olympics after 32 years and first one in the athletics. Very happy, very exciting. But before we get into that, we'll talk about the history of javelin within the sport, and then how it's been sort of like over the years throughout human history has evolved and where it's been used. So, tracing its existence back to the prehistoric time, its evolution would be spearheaded, no pun intended, by the ancient Egyptians who spearheaded a lot of other things in human history. Now, the ancient Egyptians would also use a strap with their javelins, which would allow them to retrieve them back once they throw them. So there was like a rope or a strap attached. So they would throw it and then they would retrieve it. So you don't have to sort of maybe carry more than one javelin, unless the rope snaps, in which case you have to go fetch the javelin back, reattach it, and then hang on to it. Logistically very smart. Also used by the ancient Romans during the Battle of Zama, in which the javelins were used by the Romans to herd Hannibal's elephants so they could be herded away from their formation. And that eventually led to their slaughter, and Hannibal's forces were defeated with incredible numbers. Also used by the Anglo Saxons during the Middle Ages, and has a history within the Indian subcontinent. The cavalry troops for the Mughals would use something called a barsha, which was also used by the Marathas. This was with a head and a shaft made wholly of iron or steel and used as a heavy spear. So, too heavy for the horsemen to carry, so it was used by the infantry during the attacks. In terms of the Olympics, the javelin throw, after being a part of the ancient Olympics, the javelin throw would be revived as a sport of the Olympics in the early 1870s. Years would go by, and recently the sport would find a new home, which was very unexpected. And that place is the Indian subcontinent, divided into two countries, India and Pakistan, which with nations that are usually crazed with sports like hockey, wrestling, and most importantly, cricket. An Olympic record holder who was born in Khanewal district in Punjab, Pakistan. Arshad would have humble beginnings. He was raised among seven other siblings, was always a versatile athlete, and would eventually take up javelin throwing and make his way to the Southeast Asian Games held in India. He would then go on to represent his country in the World Athletic Games in the Tokyo Olympics, where he finished fifth, and in the Commonwealth Games, as well as in the Paris Olympics. He would stand across a man, a foe who was in itself was the epitome and was in the upper echelons of the javelin throwing competition, and that guy is called Neeraj Chopra. Neeraj, who would formerly beat Arshad um, every time they faced each other, and was also a gold medalist in the Tokyo Olympics. This competition, this rivalry, would also be more or less be a camaraderie in which Neeraj, I think, with his exceptional hard work and talent, would also inspire Arshad to do the same. And even though he prevailed in the last nine times that he faced against him, this time, however, Arshad would come out on top and would break the Olympic record by throwing a 92.97-meter javelin throw. By doing so, he would win a gold for his country, a country in a dire social, political, and economic state, a country that has been desperate for a glimmer of hope, for something to be happy about. And he was able to do that. And that was evident when he would fly back home after his successful campaign in the Olympics. Thousands of people would be at the Lahore airport to receive him. The jubilation, the happiness was on display everywhere. It was in the national news in Pakistan. So, being a nation who was once on the rise to falling behind the rest of the world, it's imperative to acknowledge how much a win like this means for a nation. People who would not even be familiar with the sport now would know about the sport. And the country may have not been behind him the whole time that Arshad has been in this pursuit for greatness. He was definitely not supported by any facilities from the government of Pakistan. Until recently, he was sponsored by the Pakistan Cricket Board, so he could afford to buy a javelin. He was also injured and had to undergo an operation a year and a half ago, I think in towards the end of 2022 or early 2023. So, with the lack of support or facilities, any encouragement, Arshad is a perfect example of individual brilliance in a country like Pakistan, where I think socially there's not a lot of focus on sports. Country with not a lot of good things happening, it gets to a point where it has someone who can proudly represent them at the global stage. So while I'm sad at the state of the country on one hand, on the other hand, I am also extremely proud and happy for them. A lot of the people in Australia are happy for them. I've told my colleagues at work who were super stoked and excited. And it's always good to see, again, that love and support the camaraderie that the sport or sports can bring. With that being said, I have yapped away for too long. Thank you for watching and listening to this episode. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe and interact with the video so your boy can break ceilings and be the podcaster that I always have dreamed to be. And be well, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.